Will you pray with me? O holy and gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation on all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. For you, O God, you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So how many of you got your Transfiguration cards mailed in time this year? Anybody? You celebrating? Today is Transfiguration Sunday. It's a big celebration in the church, right? It's actually one of those really odd Sundays. You heard the story, right? The choir sang the story first, and then Bill shared it with us. I mean, we've heard this story. It's weird. It is an odd story of Jesus and the three disciples going up the mountain and all that takes place. But it is an important story, and it is placed appropriately if we will pay attention to why this story is where it is in the cycle of our church calendar. After Christmas, after the birth of Jesus, we were in a season called Epiphany, where who Jesus is and who Jesus speaks to is revealed. And so that short season of Epiphany helps us to understand Jesus not only as the Christ, but especially as the incarnate God. And we are preparing, as Jesus has prepared his disciples, we are preparing to move into the season of Lent to begin that journey to Jerusalem, to begin that journey to where Jesus will, of course, be betrayed and be handed over, will be crucified and will die and will be raised from the dead. And so this story really helps bridge between who Jesus is and what will take place in Jerusalem. It's still an odd story. But let's look at this a little bit more closely. It begins with 8 days after these sayings. Well, what were these sayings? Because we didn't go that far back, and it helps for us to have some context. This is after Jesus has asked the disciples, especially Peter, what are people saying about me? Who do they say that I am? And, well, some say you're Elijah, and some say you're this, and some say that. Well, who do you say I am? And Peter responds to him. You remember his response? He says, well, you are the Messiah. And then Jesus immediately goes on to let them know what will take place, that we are headed to Jerusalem, and this is what's going to happen. This is the first time that he tells them about his death and resurrection. So it was 8 days after that he takes James and John and Peter and says, we're gonna go have us some prayer time together. I want you to come with me. We're going up the mountain to pray. And that's exactly what they were doing. I think it's important for us to just kind of sit there for a minute. It was important to Jesus to pray. We know that. There's lots of stories in our scriptures about Jesus praying. It was important to him to pray with these three. It was important for him to take company with him, to be in prayer alongside him. At the end of the story, you'll remember that God said, this is my son, the chosen one, listen to him. So this is one of the places where we can listen to him, right? It is important and vital for us as God's people to also be a people of prayer, and it helps when we take somebody with us, right? To enter into that time of prayer. And then things get a little odd. While he was praying, his appearance changed, the appearance of his face, and his clothes became dazzling white. Does this happen to anybody? Have you had this experience somewhere? You're in the grocery store, you're in the checkout line, you grab hands with everybody around you, you start praying, and somebody's clothes turn white and their face shines and gets... Nope, I haven't had it happen either. Very interesting thing that takes place. And then all of a sudden, Moses and Elijah appear. Does that happen to you? Okay. So this is just an incredible story. And they begin talking to Jesus. Now, we'll hear in a couple of sentences that Peter and James and John are just almost overcome with sleep. I just want you to think about that for a minute, okay? Jesus' clothes have now become dazzling white. His face has changed. 2 dead men have come back to talk to him, and they're sleepy. Just wanted to point that out, something for us to think about. We're told that they being Moses and Elijah, appeared in glory, and we're speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now, the Greek word here for departure is actually exodus. So, again, who's there? Moses, Elijah. And they're speaking about the exodus experience that Jesus will have. They are speaking about Jesus' freedom and liberation. And you and I both know that when Jesus experiences freedom and liberation, we do too. So this is actually a very powerful story for us. Again, I think it's pretty funny that the boys were sleepy. And I'm grateful that they remained awake. And I absolutely love, appreciate, relate to Peter's response. He sees that Moses and Elijah are about to leave. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I'm trying to picture what it like. They're just going to walk back down the mountain. I mean, how'd they get there? But for some reason, Peter recognizes that they are about to leave. And so he's quick, right? Quick-witted Peter. He's on his toes. He says, wait, Master, hey, I got a great idea. I have got a fabulous idea. We're going to build shrines here. We're going to build 3 of them. We're going to make this a holy, holy space and have 3 markers here that we can gather around, because this is the coolest thing ever. And as he is in it, I love that Luke thought we needed to know that he did not know what he was talking about. Luke is very clear to point out to us that Peter did not understand. And so while he's still speaking and probably already in his mind has figured out what he's going to build, what it's going to look like, how he's going to decorate it, and all of those things, a cloud comes over the mountain. And that's enough, perhaps, for Peter to be quiet. And out of the cloud comes the voice of God that says, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." It is easy for us to say, well, we just got to do what Jesus taught us to do. We just got to follow those teachings of Jesus, right? That's easy. Right. It's really easy. I want to go back to one of those teachings of Jesus. He's teaching in parables because those are clear. He says, "No one after lighting a lamp hides it under a jar or puts it under a bed, but puts it on a lampstand, so that those who enter may see the light. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor is anything secret that will not become known and come to light." Now, we could interpret that in a lot of ways. What is it that Jesus is trying to tell us there? We can't keep secrets. We can't hide things. We've got to live openly and authentically. Is that one way to interpret it? They were overcome by sleep. Are y'all awake? Is that how you would interpret that? Because I interpret it as we've got to be out loud a little bit. Now, this morning, we're going to gather and talk about what's kind of weighing in the back of our mind. It is, we have gathered at a United Methodist church, and the United Methodist church has been in the news this week. Has anybody seen anything about that in the news? And we are gathered here wondering, do we belong here? We have gathered here wondering, what is this all about? What is going on to our beloved denomination? What is happening? And if you're our guest this morning, you're going, what in the world is she talking about? Oh yeah, maybe I did see that on the news. Well, I'm going to follow Jesus' teachings because he says that we're supposed to put it out there. We're not supposed to keep things secret and hide things. And so this is part of our struggle this morning. And I think it's better for us to just acknowledge it than to act like last week didn't happen. But that's just one of the teachings. There are many teachings that Jesus offered us. And it was critical for these disciples, especially Peter, who didn't understand what was going on. And I dare say, well, I'll just speak for myself. I can't understand exactly what happened at General Conference. I can't understand exactly what it means for you and me and for First United Methodist Church of Georgetown and for all the people that we are in ministry with. I don't know what it means for us. But I do know that in this story, as Peter was just trying to grasp at some kind of meaning and trying to honor a little bit of what he had heard, I know that God invited him to be quiet. I know that God invited him to just kind of breathe. And then he invited him to remember who Jesus is. And he commanded him, just as he commands us, to listen to what Jesus teaches. And so there is no shortage of things that you and I can have lots of opinions about. I dare say every time two of us gather, there's at least 3 opinions. Right? We have many opinions about many things, both related to the church and especially beyond. And yet here we have an invitation for how to deal with our opinions. We start with prayer. And then we listen to what Jesus has to say about it. Because our first response is probably not the right response, right? Our first response to build the shrines or the booths or the tabernacles or tents or whatever translation you read is probably not the response. Our response is to listen, to interpret together what it is that Jesus is calling us to do. We are broken. But the conversation that Jesus was having with Moses and Elijah was about Jesus' exodus. It was about his moment of glory. It was about his moment of freedom and liberation that is offered for us. We will not remain broken if we remain true to our understanding of this God who loves us. And what I mean by that is, let's go back to the stories of our faith. As I shared with you last week, in death there is resurrection. In this brokenness, Jesus came to bring healing and redemption and reconciliation. And you and I are invited to be a part of that. And so I invite you to pray. I invite you to stay awake. But mostly I invite you to just listen to God's chosen Son. Amen.